When men pull back, women start to worry. Have you ever been in a crowded room filled with voices and laughter, lights everywhere, yet felt completely invisible? No one looks at you. No one approaches. No one tries to connect. Not because you're not good enough, but because you're no longer something others feel drawn to notice. Many modern women are starting to feel that exact thing, but few are willing to name it. They're independent, confident, and know what they want. They once demanded space, demanded respect, demanded not to be disturbed. They said a man's gaze made them uncomfortable, that unsolicited conversations were rude, even offensive. And so, men quietly stepped back. No protest, no argument. They just pulled away. But in that quiet retreat, something shifted. Women began to sense that something wasn't right. They were no longer being approached, no longer noticed, no longer pursued. And strangely, it didn't feel empowering. It felt unsettling. As if something essential in the emotional fabric of life had quietly disappeared. Here lies the paradox. Women don't fear being bothered. They fear no longer being seen as someone worth approaching. They fear silence, not because it's uncomfortable, but because it's absolute. When men stop looking, stop initiating, stop responding, they leave behind a void, and that void can't be filled with money, social media, friends, or even the independence they fought so hard to attain. Some call it freedom. But loneliness in a crowded world is the price of freedom without connection. And now, many women successful, beautiful, powerful are beginning to realize that what they've lost isn't men. What they've lost is the value they once held in the eyes of men. The silence of men sometimes echoes louder than 1,000 rejection. It gives nothing to react to, nothing to fight against, nothing to fix. Just nothing. And that is what cuts the deepest. Women don't fear men. They fear becoming invisible to them. And when silence becomes the collective response from men, women begin to ask what's really going on. Maybe this quiet withdrawal is not random. Maybe it's a quiet answer to a culture that told men to shut up and step aside. But what really drove men to this decision? What changed in them? What made them stop reaching out? What are they feeling behind the calm, distant mask? No one knows, because when men go silent, they don't explain, they just disappear. And that is starting to scare women in ways they never saw coming. Society made men afraid of their own instincts. There's a truth no one likes to say out loud. Many men today are afraid of being themselves, not because they lack confidence, but because society has made them unsure where the line is between being natural and being dangerous. You see an attractive woman in public. You think about saying hello, a simple compliment, a kind gesture, a basic expression of interest. But then you stop. You remember that all it takes is one raised phone, one out-of-context video clip, and you could become the next creep viral moment. You're not a threat, but you know the rules have changed. One wrong time, one wrong tone, one wrong look, and suddenly, you're not a human being. You're a problem, said a meme, a headline. No one asks who you are. No one gives you a chance to explain. They just laugh, judge, and move on. Initiating used to be part of what made a man. It was courage, direction, energy. But now it's treated as intrusion. Cancel culture has made even the most basic interactions feel like legal risks. One failed attempt to connect, and you're not just rejected, you're socially erased. Men aren't stupid. They notice, they step back, they adapt. And over time, pulling back becomes more than caution. It becomes instinct. A soldier doesn't retreat because he fears battle. He retreats when he's no longer allowed to carry a weapon, when every expression of masculinity is monitored, twisted, or punished. The only move left is to disappear from the battlefield. Society puts men in a trap. If you're assertive, you're pushy. If you're quiet, you're weak. If you care, you're suspicious. If you don't, you're cold. Whatever choice you make, someone's ready to call you out. Here's a question most women never ask themselves. Do you really want to be approached, or do you just want to be chosen without anyone stepping into your space? You want to feel admired, but only on your terms. You want to feel desired, but without the pressure of responding. What men feel today is this. They're not allowed to be instinctive anymore. They're expected to be harmless, to be smooth, emotionless, careful. They're taught to hide their spark, hide their pursuit, hide their edge. What's left is a polite shell. Nice, safe, hollow. And when a man can't be who he is, he eventually chooses not to be anything at all. No conversations, no eye contact, no effort, no presence, no risk. Not because he lacks courage, but because he's tired of asking for permission to exist. So, bit by bit, men withdraw. No noise, no debate, no rebellion. They just quietly exit a game no one admitted they were playing. They're not silent because they're weak, they're just exhausted. There's a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with the body. It comes from constantly having to guess what will get you criticized next. When a man approaches a woman today, he doesn't just think about what to say. He wonders, will this be taken the wrong way? Will my tone be considered too forward? Will my eyes be seen as inappropriate? And if he gets rejected, it's not just disappointment he fears. It's the possibility of being screenshotted, filmed, mocked online, and turned into a joke for thousands of strangers. Rejection itself isn't the deepest wound. What hurts more is being laughed at, being ridiculed, being dismissed not as a man who tried, but as a joke. When his name becomes a meme, when his attempt gets turned into entertainment in group chats. No one stops to ask who he is, what his intentions were, or whether he was sincere. They just wait for a tiny misstep, and that's enough. Men aren't afraid of rejection. They're afraid of losing their dignity in the process of doing the right thing. They fear being labeled, categorized, judged by a silent courtroom where everyone plays judge but no one listens. What happens when a man's honest effort is thrown into the same pile as someone else's bad behavior? He stops trying, because any attempt can be twisted. Eventually, he no longer knows what he's allowed to do without being seen as wrong. When emotion gets trapped and has nowhere to go, it doesn't disappear. It turns inward. It becomes coldness, indifference, withdrawal, and finally, silence. There are screams that never reach the air. They stay buried in the chest like a tight coil of wire. No one hears them, but they're still there, tightening every day. When a man stops speaking, it's not because he has nothing to say. It's because he knows no one will hear him properly. He goes quiet, not because he's weak, but because he's tired. Tired of needing permission to express what used to be natural. Tired of apologizing for showing interest. Tired of explaining his existence in a world where every presence is questioned. And the tragedy is that his silence wasn't a conscious choice. It was the outcome of being shut down too many times. A little wound today, a sarcastic comment tomorrow, a misjudged attempt next week, and slowly, he no longer needs anyone to tell him to be quiet. He silences himself, no protest, no argument, no big reaction, and he doesn't quit. He just stops, calmly, quietly, without making a scene. And that's stopping. even if no one notices it, creates a space. That space doesn't have a name, but it exists, and women are beginning to feel it without understanding why. A kind of emptiness that doesn't make a sound, a distance with no shape, a quiet loss of something they can't quite describe. Maybe it's this silence that's unsettling women the most, not because they need men to say something, but because they need to feel that men are still there. Women feel something's missing, but they don't know what it is. She has everything: a great job, a cozy apartment, an expensive handbag, an independent life. She doesn't need anyone to provide for her. She doesn't need anyone to protect her. She doesn't need anyone to validate her existence. She built everything herself. And strangely, the more complete her life becomes, the more she feels something is missing. But she can't quite name what it is. She walks into a cafe. Everyone is glued to their phones. No one looks up. No one speaks. No one acknowledges her presence. Not because she's not beautiful, but because the spark of male attention has quietly disappeared from the world. There was a time when women had to avoid men's stares. Now, they search for them, but they're gone. There was a time when she found male attention annoying. Now, she feels invisible. The very men who once made her uncomfortable have gone silent. And it's that silence that makes her feel empty. There's something strange about being the ideal woman on paper, but no longer chosen in real life. She posts a photo, gets hundreds of likes, but no one invites her for a walk. Friends compliment her beauty, but no man's gaze lingers long enough to create a real connection. She's admired from a distance, but no one gets close. And then one day, she's sitting there, in a modern world full of lights and screens, and she realizes she's lonely, not because no one's around, but because no one really sees her. Loneliness in a world full of people is the cruelest kind, because there's no one to blame. Everyone's busy, everyone's got reasons, and yet the emptiness remains. She's not lacking friends, she's not lacking experiences, she's not lacking freedom, but she is lacking something deeper, something women used to have without even trying. The presence of men as men. No one initiates anymore. No one pursues. No one places her at the center of unfiltered, genuine masculine attention. No one makes her feel chosen. She once thought that didn't matter, that self-love would be enough, that she could travel alone, that she could ask someone out herself, and she can. But the more she does, the more she feels that something isn't right. A kind of energy is missing, a magnetic pull, an emotional texture that independence and achievement can't replicate. She doesn't want to go back to dependence, but she also doesn't want to live behind a locked door. Being open isn't weakness, but no one taught her that. Society only taught her to be strong, to protect herself, to never need. And now, wearing all that armor, she sits, frozen, strong, but silent. Maybe what she's missing isn't love. Maybe it's the chance to soften, to be a woman without needing to defend it, to be seen not just for her looks, but for the life inside her that still longs to connect. Then she realizes it's not just her. The women around her feel it too. They smile often. They're independent. They're capable, but their eyes seem to wander, like they're waiting for something to return. Something that used to be so normal and has now become rare. Maybe what's missing isn't men. Maybe it's the way men used to show up, in a way that was grounded, present, steady, quietly powerful, leading without shouting, protective without controlling. Something ancient, something deeply human and deeply needed. Both women and men are starting to feel it. A shared emptiness no one wants to admit. A longing without words. A quiet ache without a name. And maybe it's time someone finally said it out loud. Both are hurting, but no one dares to speak up. Modern men aren't just learning how to be good. They're learning how not to be seen as bad. And the problem is, the line between the two keeps getting blurrier. They're told to be strong but not too aggressive, to be assertive but not too close, to be steady but never controlling, to be caring but not too much. One wrong step and they get labeled as toxic. The trap is this: no one is teaching men what healthy masculinity actually looks like. They're only told what not to do. Don't be angry. Don't be dominant. Don't be too forward. But if all you're ever given is a list of don'ts, eventually, you start to wonder what you're allowed to keep. So men shrink. They stay in the gray zone, the zone of not being wrong but never really being seen either. And women, they carry their own kind of armor. They're cautious, guarded, afraid of being used, controlled, hurt, or misled. They've had disappointments. They've trusted men who weren't ready. And now they watch closely. They hesitate. They protect themselves. They still want to connect, but they no longer dare to go first. Men sense this. They feel the doubt in women's eyes, and they respond with silence, with hesitation, with distance. No one initiates anymore. No one takes the first real step. Everyone's waiting for the other to go first. And when that never happens, the space between them grows colder. Because vulnerability isn't respected anymore. It's feared. If you speak from the heart, you're seen as needy. If you show your wounds, you're seen as weak. If you care too much, you're chasing. If you act too detached, you're soulless. No one knows what the right move is anymore. There's a real image that plays out every day. Two people standing in the same room, close in space, far in presence, neither looking at each other. Both staring at their own reflection in the mirror, both waiting, both silently hoping on it, but neither reaching out. So they miss each other, in the silence, in the tension. In a world where everyone is present but no one is truly seen, we're all hurting, men and women alike, but we're too afraid to say it, too afraid to admit we're tired of pretending, too afraid to drop the mask first, because somehow fear of being exposed has become stronger than the desire to connect. And maybe this isn't just personal anymore. Maybe it's collective. Maybe what we're living through is a social fracture, a loneliness we've normalized so well, we stopped recognizing it as loneliness at all. Still, in the middle of all this confusion, there's a question, a quiet one, but it lingers. One that doesn't need a complex answer, just an honest one. What truly makes a woman respect a man? Real attraction comes from self-control, not the need to impress. Some people walk into a room without saying a word, and yet you notice them. They're not loud, they're not rushing, they're not putting on a show. But there's something about them that draws your attention. It's not about appearance. It's not about clever words. It's something harder to describe, a quiet inner presence. You feel it when a man enters a space and doesn't reach for his phone, when he doesn't rush to fill the silence, when he's not performing or pretending. He's just there, centered, grounded. And because he doesn't need your attention, you naturally give it. True attraction doesn't come from what you show. It comes from what you don't have to show. A man who's grounded doesn't crave validation. because the highest form of validation, his own, already lives inside him. When you're desperate to be accepted, you become reactive. You try too hard. You over-explain. You overreach. And women can feel that within seconds. They don't need you to be perfect. But they'll walk away if your need to prove yourself is louder than your presence. There's a subtle truth many avoid saying aloud. Women can sense a man's energy in the first few moments. They may not analyze it, but they feel it. They notice whether a man walks into their life from a place of wholeness or from a place of craving and compensation. That feeling shapes how they respond to him before he even speaks. Self-control doesn't mean being cold. It's not about acting like you don't care or faking indifference. True self-control is when you're not seeking anything, but when something comes your way, you receive it with calm. It's when you don't chase, don't control, don't cling, but you're still fully present, fully alive, and fully yourself. You don't have to say you're strong. You don't have to declare you're a leader. A real man doesn't need group approval. He doesn't need applause. His presence makes people pause, not through force, through quiet certainty. The more you crave validation, the more you lose your magnetism. Because the need for validation sends out a message, one you can't fake your way out of. And women feel it, just like you can feel when someone's afraid of being seen. So instead of asking, "Does she like me?" ask, "Do I respect the man I am when no one is watching?" Because at the end of the day, the thing that makes someone stay is not how you make them feel about you. It's how they feel about themselves when they're around you. Attraction doesn't come from action. It comes from your state. The state you're in when you're fully with yourself. Not grasping, not second-guessing, not performing. Just being honest and being unshakable in that honesty. And here's the truth: you don't need to attract everyone. You only need to be so deeply grounded, so real, so calm that you attract the right ones. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. Sometimes, all it takes is for you to enter quietly and sit still, and people start to wonder who you are. And if you've ever asked, what makes a woman respect a man, maybe the answer is this: she respects him most when he's not doing anything to earn it. Yet somehow, she can't help but give it anyway. Because what he radiates can't be faked. So the question isn't, am I attractive enough? The question is, would I want to be friends with the man I am? Because if you don't, why would she? That kind of calm presence, that deep internal alignment that doesn't come from the world outside. It comes when you return to yourself, not for anyone else, but for you. Return to your masculine core and stand your ground there. There's a kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, doesn't need to compete, doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. A man who knows who he is doesn't bend himself to meet others' expectations. He doesn't chase trends. He doesn't mimic popular voices. He doesn't need to be right all the time. He just needs to be real and not betray what he knows to be true inside. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to chase titles. Well, you don't need to meet some modern checklist of masculinity alpha mindset, financial status, perfect physique, expensive car. Those things may or may not come. But the groundedness within you that's yours to forge, no one can give it to you. No one can teach it to you. You find it in silence, in pain, in the moments when you fall, and no one sees. You don't need to impress. You just need to carry yourself in a way that says you're not shaken, not easily swayed, not pulled into emotional games, not paralyzed by someone else's silence. You're the kind of man who can be misunderstood and stay silent. who can be rejected and not lose his worth, who can stand alone and still feel whole. That kind of man doesn't seek anything, but others are drawn to him. Not because he lacks something, but because he radiates something. Something solid, something calm, something real. You are the mountain. You don't need to move. You don't need to announce your height. You don't need to beg for attention, and yet, people will still look up. And if someone dares to climb, they'll discover something the noise at the base could never explain, that stillness is power. That consistency is magnetic. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not react. You don't need to conquer anyone. You just need to not lose to yourself. You may have been the man someone once wanted to have, but have you ever been the man you wanted to become? If that question made you pause, if it stirred something quiet and deep inside you, then maybe you're ready. Ready for harder truths, deeper truths, more honest questions. And if this journey made you feel something you haven't felt in a long time, if it made you slow down, breathe differently, or think twice about the man you are, then maybe you found a place worth returning to. A space that won't tell you who to become, but will gently remind you to come home. To the man you were always meant to be.